Lorain, Ohio. On Sunday, July 2nd, 2023, in the 700 block of Oberlin Avenue near West 8th Street, Lorain police officer Elliot Palmer, patrolling the area, saw 5 large yellow dogs running loose through several residents' yards and on the sidewalk, and none of them were leashed, he wrote in his report. The body cam footage shows a woman trying to hold on to 2 other dogs by their tails, and one of the dogs, named Dixie, gets away from her and runs towards Palmer. He then fires his weapon at the dog multiple times. In the video, Dixie gets up and drags her hind legs until she is at the end of a neighbor's driveway. Dixie's owner, Tammy Kearns, can be seen walking up to Palmer, yelling at him that he just shot her dog. Her daughter, Melanie Kearns, was the woman holding Dixie and another dog when Palmer walked up. The dog died on the sidewalk as a result of her injuries. Melanie said the first bullet hit Dixie in the spine. The Kearnses have threatened to sue the Lorain Police Department in the wake of Dixie's death.
Broomfield, Colorado. On September 29, 2022, the Denver Police Department Fugitive Unit sought 25-year-old Anthony Lainez in connection with the investigation of a homicide in Denver. Lainez had outstanding warrants for his arrest, and the Fugitive Unit was engaged in physical and electronic surveillance to locate and apprehend him. The DA's office said detectives watched Lainez leave the home with a woman and drive off in a white Ford Edge with temporary New Mexico tags. The woman was identified as Sky Toya. Broomfield Police Department officers, who had been called in for backup and tried to stop Lainez, but he drove around them and took off. Lainez was heading south on Sheridan in a white Ford Edge when he turned left and got into a crash with a blue Ford Explorer, police said. Lainez got out of his car after it spun out. He tried to get into the car of another driver who had stopped after witnessing the crash. Lainez got in the front passenger seat and Toya hopped in the back passenger side. Lainez held a gun to the driver's ribs and told him to go, but the driver pulled the keys out of the ignition and tried to escape. Lainez grabbed the driver and pulled him back into the car. Undercover Denver detective James Wadler ran up to the Corolla while yelling at Lainez to show his hands. He described that Lainez appeared to be holding the victim as a shield. Denver detective Jay Lopez arrived moments after Detective Wadler. Lopez drove his truck near the Corolla to distract Lainez, got out, and ran up to the front quarter panel of the Corolla to break the windshield with the muzzle of his rifle. Lainez pulled out a gun and shot Lopez in the neck. Lopez shot at Lainez while dropping to the ground. During that shootout, Wadler pulled the hostage to safety and returned fire at Lainez, seated in the driver's seat. The carjacking victim fell to the ground. Detective Wadler stepped backwards and fell to the ground. Lainez got out of the driver's door while holding the gun and advanced on Detective Wadler. Detective Wadler fired his gun at Lainez several more times, striking him and causing him to fall to the ground. Denver Detective Cole Connors heard the report of the crash and attempted carjacking. He was the 3rd officer on scene. Detective Connors saw Lainez on the ground reaching for the handgun that lay next to him. Detective Connors yelled, "Don't grab the gun." Lainez ignored the command and reached for the handgun. Detective Connors fired his handgun at Lainez until he stopped moving and was no longer a threat to anyone. Immediately after the shooting incident, the Denver detectives were joined by their fellow Fugitive Unit officers and Broomfield police officers. The officers tended to Detective Lopez, and Toya was taken into custody without incident. Lainez was pronounced dead on scene. Detective Lopez survived and spent nearly a month and a half in the hospital. Criminalists assigned to the CIRT gathered evidence and processed the scene. A loaded 9mm semi-automatic handgun was located. Evidence collected from the scene confirmed that Lainez fired 2 rounds from this gun. The weapon was later discovered to have been reported stolen. Lainez tested positive for cocaine and methamphetamine. Additional guns and ammunition, drugs, and $1,000 in cash were found inside the Corolla. Toya, the female participant who was arrested on scene, was charged with aggravated robbery, possession of a controlled substance, and first-degree criminal trespass. Toya pled guilty to aggravated robbery in Broomfield County District Court and, on April 27, 2023, was sentenced to 12 years in the Department of Corrections.
Okaloosa County, Florida on November 12, 2023. Okaloosa County Sheriff's Office deputies had responded to McLaren Circle around 8:42 a.m. in reference to an initial call of a vehicle driving around honking its horn and disrupting the peace since 3 a.m. A second call for service came in from a woman stating her boyfriend, 22-year-old Marquis Jackson, had committed grand theft auto, a felony offense, and had been calling and texting her threats. The victim provided text messages she said had been taken from inside her vehicle showing what appeared to be a firearm suppressor pointing at the dash of the victim's vehicle. Jackson showed up at the scene around 9:09 a.m. and was detained, searched, handcuffed, and placed in the rear of Deputy Jesse Hernandez's patrol vehicle while the investigation continued, and the victim completed the affidavit for the stolen vehicle. The victim told deputies Jackson had a silencer and she was not sure where it was, and that also he had more than one weapon. As Deputy Hernandez was returning with a victim's rights form for the caller, other deputies found the victim's vehicle at 1656 Hunt Club Street. Deputy Hernandez was approaching the passenger side rear door of his patrol car to do a secondary search of Jackson when he heard a pop sound which he perceived to be a gunshot and believed he had been hit. He began yelling shots fired multiple times, falling to the ground and rolling. He fired into the patrol car. After witnessing Deputy Hernandez's response and reaction, the Sergeant Beth Roberts responded with gunshots towards the car as well in response to the perceived threat. Jackson escaped injury and no weapon was located. Deputy Hernandez had been with the OCSO since January 2022. Sergeant Roberts has been with the OCSO since May 2008. Both were current on resistance training and firearms qualifications. Deputy Hernandez resigned on December 4, 2023, during the investigation but was ultimately found to have violated policy. The deputies were cleared of any criminal wrongdoing. Jackson wasn't injured and no weapon was located, the OCSO said. After investigation, the sound was determined to have been made by an acorn hitting the roof of the car.
Milwaukee, Wisconsin. On Friday, May 5, 2023, at approximately 11 p.m., Milwaukee police officers were in the area of the 1200 block of S. Cesar Chavez Drive. Several officers were already deployed to the area due to a large crowd that was engaged in reckless behavior. Officers were trying to disperse the crowd when several individuals started firing shots in the vicinity. An officer encountered an armed individual that was firing shots on the 1200 block of S. 15th Place. The officer gave the suspect several commands to drop the gun, at which time the officer discharged his firearm, subsequently striking the suspect. The suspect, a 22-year-old Greenfield man, was transported to a local hospital for treatment of non-fatal injuries. The suspect's handgun was recovered. The officer involved in this incident is a 33-year-old male with over 7 years of service. He was placed on administrative duty as is routine in an officer-involved shooting. Simultaneously, another officer encountered a separate armed suspect that was firing shots on the 1200 block of S. Cesar Chavez Drive. The officer gave the suspect several commands to stop, at which time the officer discharged his firearm several times, subsequently striking the suspect. The suspect, a 17-year-old Milwaukee male, was transported to a local hospital for treatment of serious injuries. The suspect's handgun was recovered. The officer involved in this incident is a 40-year-old male with over 7 years of service. He was placed on administrative duty, as is routine in an officer-involved shooting. The suspect was taken to a hospital for treatment of serious injuries listed in stable condition. There were no other reported injuries. When these incidents occurred, several firearms were discharged in the vicinity, including fully automatic firearms. No other individuals, including the officers, were injured by gunfire.
Seattle, Washington. On July 18, 2023, around 2:45 p.m., Seattle police responded to a report of a barricaded suspect where 2 women were being held against their will in the 2200 block of 15th Avenue West in Lower Queen Anne. When officers arrived, they learned the 49-year-old suspect entered the room, implied he had a knife and made threats to harm both women. Officers assigned to SPD's hostage negotiation team, along with SWAT, arrived on scene. Officers made entry to the room and took the suspect into custody. Both victims were uninjured. A knife was recovered at the scene. The suspect was booked into King County Jail for unlawful imprisonment.
Lawton, Oklahoma. 2 former officers from the Lawton Police Department have been charged with first-degree manslaughter in connection to an officer-involved shooting that resulted in the death of Quadri Sanders in December 2021. After review of the entire case file presented by the OSBI, including the medical examiner's autopsy report, the Comanche County District Attorney's Office has made the determination that the shooting of Quadri Sanders was not justified. Officers Robert Hinkle and Nathan Ronan have been charged with first-degree manslaughter and are presumed innocent of the charges until proven guilty. Their bond was set at $25,000 each. Both men posted bail. A hearing is set for August 1st, 2022, with Judge Emmett Taylor assigned to the case. On December 5th, 2021, officers from the Lawton Police Department responded to 1806 NW Lincoln Avenue, Lawton, Comanche County, Oklahoma. The officers were responding to a call received by dispatch at 20:37 hours from one of the residents at said property. The call to dispatch was made in reference to a male being present at said property in violation of an active protective order, and said male was in possession of a firearm. Once officers arrived at 1806 NW Lincoln Avenue, the suspect was identified as Quadri Sanders. Officers learned that Sanders was inside the home located at 1806 NW Lincoln Avenue and was refusing to let one of the residents leave. Officers set up a perimeter around the house. A sergeant with the Lawton Police Department then began giving Sanders orders using a PIA system in a patrol vehicle. Shortly after commands were given, a female resident of the home exited. Minutes later, Sanders was seen going out the back door of the home. An officer gave Sanders commands to show his hands, which he immediately complied with, but then Sanders ran back into the home. Seconds later, Quadri Sanders walked out of the front door of the home. Sanders was met underneath the carport by officers Robert Hinkle and Nathan Ronan. Both officers Hinkle and Ronan were wearing body cameras which captured the following events. Officer Hinkle begins telling Sanders hands as well as down, 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 down. Sanders' hands are clearly seen, and the only item visible in his hands is a ball cap, which he transfers from his right hand to his left hand. As he is receiving these orders, Sanders quickly turns back towards the front door of the home. Officers Hinkle and Ronan then walk closer to Sanders. As Hinkle approaches, Sanders can be seen raising both of his hands in the air, above his head. At that time, Officer Hinkle shoots his firearm 4 times at Sanders. Sanders falls to the ground and appears to have been shot, at which time Officer Hinkle once again orders hands, and to quit reaching. Sanders sits up from his back with his hands above his head, at which time Officer Hinkle fires his firearm 7 additional times. Simultaneously with these shots, Officer Ronan also fires his weapon at Sanders 4 times. Sanders is then secured by Officer Hinkle. On the way to Comanche County Memorial Hospital by ambulance, Quadri Sanders was pronounced dead. No weapon was located on Sanders' body or in the area where he was shot.
Columbus, Ohio. On July 4, 2023, law enforcement attempted to stop 23-year-old Jadarius Rose of Memphis, Tennessee for a missing mudflap on his semi-truck. Rose did not stop his vehicle and led multiple agencies on a chase. He was eventually stopped on U.S. Route 35 but refused to exit his vehicle when ordered multiple times. According to the recordings released by the Ross County Sheriff's Office, Rose repeatedly told the dispatcher he was confused about why he was being pulled over and why police had their guns drawn after he briefly stopped the truck before driving away. The dispatcher told Rose multiple times he needed to stop and comply with police. Soon after, Rose pulled over and exited the semi-truck, surrounded by several police cars and officers. Footage released by the State Highway Patrol shows. Later, after blowing out his front left tire, Rose can be seen exiting the truck as officers urged him to approach them with his hands above his head or to get on the ground. The bodycam footage shows Officer Ryan Speakman with the Circleville Police Department holding back the K9, and a trooper can be heard repeatedly yelling, "Do not release the dog," with his hands up. However, Officer Speakman deployed the dog, and it can be seen in the video attacking Rose. A trooper can be heard yelling repeatedly, "Get the dog off of him." And Rose appears to be in pain and yelling, "Get it off. Please, please." Before the attack ends, Rose was treated at a hospital for dog bites. Rose was charged with failure to comply. It's not clear why he refused to stop for the inspector and police. He was reportedly delivering products to Grove City, Ohio, before returning home to Tennessee. Rose was released from the hospital that day and taken to the Ross County Jail. He was released from jail on July 7, the jail said. Officer Speakman has been placed on paid administrative leave, according to Circleville Mayor Don McIlroy. On July 26, 2023, Officer Ryan Speakman has been terminated, effective immediately, the department said in a statement. Speakman's actions during the review of his canine apprehension of suspect Jadarius Rose on July 4 show that Officer Speakman did not meet the standards and expectations we hold for our police officers, the department said. His firing comes a day after the department said he was on paid administrative leave, which is standard during use of force investigations.
Pueblo West, Colorado. A mother has filed a federal civil rights lawsuit in U.S. federal court for the District of Colorado after her son was shot and killed by Pueblo County deputies outside a middle school. On February 22, 2022 at approximately 3:23 p.m., Pueblo County Sheriff's deputies Charles McWhorter and Cassandra Gonzalez were dispatched to the Liberty Point International Middle School at 484 S. Maher Drive, Pueblo West, Colorado, on reports of a suspicious male party trying to open car doors. They were informed the male party may be on something, suggesting possible intoxication. The initial reporting party, Eric Valencia, told dispatch that a male had become aggressive with one car and he was trying to get into other cars in the parking lot. Initially, Valencia stated that the male was out of his line of sight on the east side of the parking lot. The male then came back into Valencia's sight and Valencia said the male was wearing a jacket with gray sleeves and black in color. Valencia then tells dispatch that the male was being confronted by someone from the school, then he began walking west. Valencia then sees the male get into the back seat of a white four-door SUV, possibly a Mazda with tinted windows and approximately 8 to 9 cars in from the road. When Deputy McWhorter arrives on scene, dispatch gives him the description and location of the vehicle as described by Valencia. Deputy McWhorter asks dispatch for more specific information, as there were several white cars in the parking lot. Deputy McWhorter is then told that it is the white car that 2 children are walking in front of. This information assisted Deputy McWhorter in locating the vehicle. Deputy McWhorter advises dispatch that the male is in the back seat of a white Lexus SUV with Colorado plate CIW 976. Deputy McWhorter then contacts the male later identified as 32-year-old Richard Ward. Ward was with his mother, Christy Ward Stamp, and her boyfriend to pick up his younger brother from Liberty Point International Middle School, according to the lawsuit filed in U.S. District Court for Colorado. Pueblo County Sheriff's deputies approached Ward after they received a report that he had been opening doors of nearby vehicles in the pickup waiting area, officials have said. Ward stepped out of his mother's SUV for a brief walk, mistook another white SUV for hers and got in the wrong vehicle, the lawsuit says. He apologized to the woman who was driving after he realized his mistake and returned to his mother's vehicle, the suit says. Pueblo Deputy Charles McWhorter arrived on scene and talked to Ward in the backseat of his mother's SUV. In the body cam video, McWhorter touches Ward's arm and asks him why he's acting strange. Ward responds that cops make him nervous and he has anxiety. Ward explains to the officers that he has had bad encounters with police in Pueblo before. McWhorter then asks for Ward's ID and as he reaches for his identification, Ward slips something in his mouth. His family attorney said Ward had been diagnosed with an anxiety disorder and was prescribed medicine for it. In the body cam video, McWhorter then demands to know what it is and drags Ward to the floor. They tussle on the ground for around 20 seconds. During this time, deputies said to stop resisting multiple times. McWhorter then shot Ward 3 times in the chest. Ward was unarmed. The deputies closed the car door and stood with Ward's body for nearly 3 minutes until medical assistance arrived. He died on scene. The sheriff's deputies involved in the case were cleared of any criminal charges by the district attorney following an investigation that found the shooting justified.
Monroe, Louisiana. The city of Monroe has released bodycam footage from the night of April 21, 2020, that shows an officer kicking Timothy Williams in the head during the arrest. Officers confronted Williams in response to an alarm call on April 21. Police said he displayed a fake gun. The arrest report said a crack pipe fell out of Williams' pocket while he was being searched for other weapons. Williams said he was afraid and ran from police while being searched. Williams said he ran from police but stopped when he realized he couldn't outrun them. Later on in the video, another officer kicks Williams in the face. From then on, the video shows the officer with the bodycam on walks away, while Williams is left screaming in the background. In the complaint, he said as many as 8 MPD officers used force against him during an arrest while handcuffed. One officer, Jared Preston DeSadier, 42, was arrested after being placed on administrative leave. He has since resigned. He was booked into Wachita Correctional Center on July 25 on charges of malfeasance in office and second-degree battery in connection with the incident. 4 other officers are also on administrative leave.
That's all, Zipsters! Like and subscribe.